I feel like you are the only person that understands me, Beef Boss. Everyone else has already made videos on the new Mario Kart and Donkey Kong. No one would care what I have to say about them. My career as a YouTuber is officially a wrap. I'm just gonna drink my sorrows away. What is it, Beef Boss? Can't you see I'm busy? Eureka! I know just what to do! I am a genius after all. Kirby and the Forgotten Land was a pretty big deal. It was Kirby's first full 3D platforming adventure, and the little guy had been around for nearly 30 years. People loved it too, to the point it became the best-selling title in the series. And as for myself, it helps cheer me up when a lot of games I was looking forward to were personally disappointing me. 3 years later, it was announced Forgotten Land would be receiving its very own Nintendo Switch 2 edition, with improved graphics and brand new content. Personally, I was excited, but also concerned, as there have been times where a game adding new stuff years after release didn't exactly stick the landing for me. For example, in Mario Kart 8 Deluxe, previously almost every single track looked amazing and played amazing. Then the Booster Course Pass comes along, and by the end of it, a good amount of the tracks don't look the greatest and also don't play the greatest either. This is Athens Dash. I hate this track! And it isn't really possible to ignore it even if you don't buy it, because it's now interwoven into the main game. Unlike something such as Bowser's Fury, an expansion that's completely separate from the main experience. I still love Mario Kart 8, but it made my opinion on the overall package go down a little bit, and was worried the same would happen to Forgotten Land. But before we get into any of that, what made this game so great to begin with? Kirby is sucked into a mysterious new world and explores these bunch of levels with the newly added power of the third dimension. He is in search of the captured Waddle Dees, but of course, there will be obstacles and bad guys along the way. This is where Kirby's trusty copy abilities come in, each with their own moveset and strengths in combat or puzzle solving. But alongside those are mouthful mode transformations, which are new to Forgotten Land. These are more situational abilities gained when Kirby inhales a large object, but instead of eating it, it gets stuck in his mouth. It's yet another innovation for the series, as instead of getting a moveset that resembles what he inhaled, now Kirby can straight up use the object itself. These are only temporary, but because they're usually necessary to proceed, the levels that feature this mechanic can be built around them. And not to mention, it's just fun to see Kirby stretched and squashed to all these ridiculous forms. Scattered throughout the levels are blueprints that allow you access to upgrade your abilities, as well as these collectible figurines, which are basically trophies from Smash Bros. Nintendo really ought to sue HAL for stealing this idea from the guys that made Melee. Also found in these levels are lots of side missions that accomplishing will free even more Waddle Dees. Despite the somewhat simplistic difficulty, these keep the gameplay engaging by encouraging playing well and being mindful of your surroundings. Sometimes you'll have to defeat an enemy a certain way or avoid taking damage. Other times you'll have to find a secret tucked away somewhere, meet an optional time requirement, or even take a nap. You can even do these unintentionally by simply being good at the game, and it not only gives you more Waddle Dees, but it now means you don't have to come back and do that specific mission later, which is especially helpful when going for that sweet 100% completion. But for players that only want to experience the main story, they can just zoom through the levels while ignoring most of these. I say most because you do need some of these guys in each world to make progress, so you gotta try at least a little bit. The rescued Waddle Dees relocate to Waddle Dee Town. I did not see that coming! It's not only nice to see the population slowly grow, but as you progress the game, they'll unlock more things you can do around town. One of my favorite parts of Forgotten Land is that almost everything makes sense in the context of the in-game world. In Kirby titles of old, the extra modes were found on the main menu, separate from the main adventure. But when you unlock the minigames in Forgotten Land, new locations are built in Waddle Dee Town, where you head over and partake in the minigames there. The boss rush is now an actual coliseum you enter, with a crowd cheering you on and everything. And the music player is now a band who you can request to play. Well, I think we get the idea. Integrating these into the world makes it feel not only more believable, but more rewarding, as everything you do directly contributes to your main adventure. Besides the main levels, you can also find portals to Treasure Road, which offers optional challenge stages that utilize specific copy or mouthful abilities. These are a nice change of pace as they are shorter, but also have a time limit, and if you manage to beat them, you'll be rewarded with a rare stone. This resource is needed to evolve your copy abilities, which is yet another major change to the Kirby tradition. scenes. Previously, the fire ability at the start of the game would be the same fire ability at the very end, but now there are multiple stages of the fire ability, each offering different appearances and levels of power. The same applies to every copy ability, and I do mean every ability. Rare stones are only obtained through doing side content, so when you finally catch them out for an upgrade, it's such an awesome feeling. That you went out of your way from the main adventure to work for this, and your reward is this huge advancement for your abilities. The upgrades for said abilities are most noticeable when facing this game's bad guys. Some may need you to keep your distance or find a nearby mouthful transformation before being able to take them out. Upgrades will come even more handy when it comes to the bosses. If you're having a hard time, the upgrades will give you a better fighting chance. If these bosses pose no threat to you, then the upgrades help get them out of your way quicker. I'd say where the enemy variety is weakest would be the mid-bosses. There's only 4 of them in the main game, which means around the end they'll start feeling less of an epic fight and more of a nuisance. However, I'd say the main boss fights are really solid. Difficulty-wise, they may be a little on the easy side, but they make up for it in terms of memorability. They each have distinct designs and attack patterns from one another. Even the build-up to the battles themselves are pretty neat. Memorable boss fights don't necessarily have to be difficult, they can be carried by a good presentation and at least trying to feel like a battle. I think it's why players were disappointed with Donkey Kong Bonanza's bosses, but are fine with something like, I don't know, Zelda Twilight Princess. Both of these games' bosses are on the easier side, but people are more forgiving of Twilight Princesses because they at least attempt to feel like a battle, and cause they're the coolest thing ever. Whereas in Bonanza, it can feel like a lot of the boss fights end before even having a chance to get good. Forgotten Lands bosses get absolutely walloped if you know what you're doing, but most of them will have some opportunity to fight back the best they can. And even then, if you want a challenge, the game provides that as well, as there is a sort of hard mode after you beat the main final boss. By the way, I'll mention this here because I don't know where else to. Forgotten Land potentially has the most insane finale of any Nintendo game of all time, which probably isn't that surprising for this series at this point, but still. Anyways, those who weren't satisfied with the challenge of the main game, this is where the difficulty increase comes in. An additional world where each level is a condensed version of multiple levels from the main game. Here, the enemies are much tougher and the collectibles can be crazy hidden at times. I won't be showing it because of spoilers, but for those who know, the last boss of this world is easily one of the most exciting in the series, both from a story and gameplay standpoint. And after that unlocks the ultimate Cup Z, a gauntlet of all of the toughest bosses in the game, with little healing offered throughout. It is a very worthy final challenge, or at least, it was the final challenge. We'll get to that. I think that wraps up what's so awesome about the gameplay of Forgotten Land, but what about everything else complementing it? Well, the general art style is gorgeous, easily one of the best looking games on the original Switch. As expected for Kirby, the locations are all very colorful, with each area having its distinct color palette. I will say, I don't blame anyone if they find the location themes to be a little basic. You've got your grass, beach, snow. Even the amusement park theming I feel is slowly joining the ranks of locations I'm not surprised to find in a platformer, though I've never really minded this for a couple of reasons. This is Kirby's first 3D game, so it makes sense they wanted to play it a little safe, but I also love how these areas contrast with the post-apocalyptic vibes of the game. It's interesting to see how these environments have overgrown what once were populated towns, shopping malls, and all sorts of industrial stuff. It ties in with the theming of Forgotten Land as well. These locations, overtaken by nature, are inhabited by the main bad guys, a group of villains primarily consisting of animals. Even classic Kirby enemies have been affected by this new environment, with untamed, savage new appearances. Even King Dedede. I've never seen a more ferocious penguin in my life. Well, there was that one time I was at the zoo and thought it'd be funny to... Then to finish off the presentation, there's this game's sound design. For sound effects, there's a bunch of rather satisfying ones. From Kirby's cute little jump to inhaling an ability and especially the sounds of combat. What you hear after finishing off a boss is truly a sound fitting for a final blow. Just listen to it. Awesome. But my favorite part of Forgotten Land's audio is its soundtrack, and the fact it actually tries to have one. Something that has really disappointed me about recent Nintendo games is their insistence to keep using subdued, ambient music for areas instead of more catchy, melody-driven tunes. Not saying it's awful to listen to or anything, but as someone who grew up and catchy music was always prevalent in the games I played, a memorable soundtrack is the special sauce that makes a game go from good to great in my eyes. Forgotten Land's soundtrack is wonderful. I don't think it's as good as something like Return to Dreamland, but it's still very solid, and again, it's the effort that counts. I will say, for as incredible of a main theme this game has, it is used a lot throughout the adventure. If anything, it might be used too much. One of the rewards for 100% is a new rendition of the main theme that plays in Waddle Town. But then the reward for getting all the gacha figures is a different rendition of the main theme that plays when viewing them. Like, I feel like there's a bit of overlap here, you know? But that doesn't take away from how lovely this soundtrack still is. There are 96 music tracks in the original Forgotten Land, and that's not even including the plethora of music added for the Switch 2 edition. Actually, now that I've gone over why I think Forgotten Land was so great in the first place, I think it's time we get into the new stuff, shall we? Starting off, the graphical upgrade is basically perfect. The bump in resolution makes everything look so crisp and clear. Still not used to seeing Nintendo games looking this snazzy on official hardware. And Forgotten Land on Switch 1 already looked amazing, but with the power of Switch 2, they were able to push this game's visuals to its full potential. Now for the new content, let's make one thing clear. Star-Crossed World is more Kirby and the Forgotten Land. It is not nearly as ambitious as something like Bowser's Fury. There are 12 new levels that appear on the usual world map, each with their own optional side missions to complete as well. Instead of saving Waddle, you're rescuing Starries, who are trying to prevent this great evil who is definitely not a boss fight from escaping. Starries don't unlock anything extra like the Waddle do, which is kind of a bummer. It seems like the only reason to get them all is if you're going for completion. I do like these little guys though. They're cute. They don't talk. Thank goodness. There's no new copy abilities to be found, however there are 3 new mouthful mode transformations that only show up in these levels. Spring Mouth is your standard jump really high ability found in platformers. Doesn't make it any less fun though. Next is Gear Mouth, definitely my favorite. You can do a boost attack and also stick to walls. If you do a boost off a wall, you get huge airtime, and the puzzles utilizing this are really satisfying. Also, when you use it in 2-player, Kirby holds Bandana Waddle Dee like this, and it might be the cutest thing I've ever seen. Last up is Sign Mouth, letting you slide down hills. Speeding up by defeating enemies is a neat mechanic, but I'll admit the controls took a little getting used to. In these levels, the usual enemies and mid-bosses have been upgraded, resulting in increased health and adjusted attack patterns. There's also a brand new enemy to fight, and I'm not sure if it counts as a normal enemy or a mid-boss. It's in this strange middle ground. Either way, a good addition to the enemy lineup. As expected, there's a new boss fight at the end of this expansion, and it is a crazy difficulty spike compared to the majority of the other bosses. From a story standpoint, it may seem disappointing at first, and while I can't speak for everyone, after reading the description of the final figurine, I went, huh, that actually makes sense. On that note, there are a total of 86 new EX figures to collect, and ouch, they are expensive. 250 coins per pull? I played through the levels multiple times, beat the new boss rush, even used a present code, and just barely had enough for the final one. Actually, now that I think about it, what is this Waddle Dee's problem? At least the other figures being random makes sense considering they're dispensed from this type of machine. But this guy's just like, hey Kirby, thanks for saving the world multiple times. Ignore the fact I could just open this box and sell these figures to you normally, but instead I'm gonna make you gamble your hard-earned money by making it random and possible for you to pull duplicates. Nobody loves you! Anyways, the new boss rush is pretty cool. The Ultimate Cup ZEX is not a totally new arena, rather an expanded upon version of the Ultimate Cup Z, making this the true final challenge. Most of the enemies are the same, however, with the inclusion of the mid-bosses and final boss from Star-Crossed World. This arena had me fighting for my life! Even with the final sword upgrade fully maxed out, I beat it first try, but it took me over half an hour. Like, alright dev team, we get it. Everyone saying Kirby games are too easy is annoying. Doesn't mean you have to take it out on us. And finally, the new music. Holy moly, that's a lot of music. 54 tracks are added for a total of 150 songs in this game, and thankfully the new additions live up to the same level of quality as the original game's soundtrack. For starters, the main theme of Star-Crossed World, Twinkling Star Showers, is phenomenal. The vocal version is amazing, and the instrumental one that plays in Winter Horns might be my new favorite level track. Some of the rearrangements are very nice. The desert theme, for example, is a crazy upgrade, and my favorite part of the music is that Shogo Sakai came back to work on it. He's a composer probably most known for some of the most iconic songs of the Super Smash Bros. Series. The Melee opening, the Zelda 2 temple theme, that Dr. Mario remix everyone really likes, all his doing. and even his lesser-known soundtracks are still incredible. Mother 3, Part-Time UFO, and a lot of the wacky Kirby spin-offs. He did work on Dream Buffet the same year Forgotten Land was released, but the year after that he left HAL Laboratories, and I feared he was done with the Kirby franchise for good. But he's here and dropped multiple contenders for the best song in the entire game. Like, dude, can we talk about that Alival Mall remix? So with all that being said, what do I think about Star-Crossed World as a whole? Like I said, it's more of the same and doesn't deviate too far from what the original Forgotten Land was going for, and while that may be disappointing to some, for me it is exactly what I wanted out of it. The Xenoblade X re-release on Switch, for as many good changes as it made, the additional story content really soured my opinion on the overall game because it felt completely detached from the original stuff. Star-Crossed World knows it's an expansion of Forgotten Land and builds on its core gameplay while maintaining its identity and not detracting from the base game experience. It doesn't try to be something it isn't, and in a time where games can feel like they're trying a little too hard sometimes, I seriously respect that. Now, for as much as I enjoy Star-Crossed World and Forgotten Land, I'd be lying if I said they were perfect. So, what didn't I like about them both? First off, how about that title, huh? Kirby and the Forgotten Land Nintendo Switch 2 Edition plus Star-Crossed World! Now that's a mouthful. Okay, but seriously, my main criticism of Forgotten Land is how the side missions are hidden from the player. It kinda makes sense the first time because they want you to enjoy the level normally, but after you complete the level, instead of showing you all the remaining hidden objectives you missed, it only reveals one.
What?
Yeah, really not a fan of this, since it means if you're struggling to find what to do by yourself, you may end up playing certain levels 3 to 4 times, potentially even more if you're bad, like me. This complaint carries over to Star-Crossed World as well, and I wish they just showed you all the objectives after clearing a level once. As I mentioned before, collecting all the EX figures is super expensive. I think beating the last arena should have handed out way more starry coins to help with that. No new treasure road stages. It would have been nice to have challenges around the 3 new mouthful mode abilities, as well as an opportunity for a few more rare stones. Let's see here. Oh yeah, where's Magolor? I mean, I wasn't expecting him to play a huge role in the story, but the fact he isn't anywhere for Kirby's big jump to 3D? Come on, man. And the last big complaint I have is the price of it all. I'll be honest, as someone that already owned Forgotten Land, I didn't think $20 for the expansion was too bad. Going for 100%, I got 12 new levels with new mechanics, boss fights, 86 figurines, and 54 music tracks. Not saying it's an objectively good price, all I'm saying is I personally didn't mind. What I do mind, however, is the Switch 2 edition for first-time players costing $80. Nintendo, come on. Typically, games decrease in price after a couple of years. This makes purchasing any DLC for first-time buyers less painful, as what was once the original price for the game now gets you the game as well as extra content. But like every other first-party Nintendo title since 2017, the base price of Forgotten Land never went down. So the full-price game plus the $20 for the Switch 2 stuff all at once is just brutal. I don't know, man. Couldn't this have been at least $70 for first-time buyers? That is still a lot for an older game, but at least it isn't as horrifying as 80. And if you want the visual enhancements when playing on Switch 2, you have no choice but to buy the $20 upgrade. Nintendo, I wanna love you guys, but sometimes you really push it. I say this because I want to recommend your stuff to friends and family. You know, to like share the Nintendo magic or something like that. But it's just not easy when you pull shenanigans like this. Back in my day, I could barely afford $40 3DS games. But I've rambled long enough. Time to wrap things up. I am just so happy Star-Crossed World ended up being a worthy upgrade to Forgotten Land. In fact, it was integrated into the main game so well, if there wasn't a giant plus Star-Crossed World in the title, and if my first playthrough was the Switch 2 edition, I very well might have assumed it was part of Forgotten Land from the beginning. This game is so close to beating Planet Robobot as my favorite in the series. I do think Robobot is still the king because it's much easier to replay in comparison, but regardless, Kirby and the Forgotten Land was easily one of my favorite games on the Switch, and alongside this expansion, will continue to be one of my favorites on the Switch 2. Now, is it one of the best Nintendo games ever made? I don't know about that. No. What do you mean, no? Oh, I see. Beef Boss pointed out the claim that I just made is incorrect, as there are not 1, not 2, but 3 types of burgers Kirby can eat in Forgotten Land. There's even an entire minigame where you can distribute hamburgers. Now I can say with full confidence this is one of the best Nintendo games ever made.